My fiance's grandmother has a large collection of antiques because of her late husband. There's a specific clock in question, and we accidentally opened something up. A few months ago, his dad was coming home from Japan, so the entire family got together to stay at his nana's cabin. His grandmother and I are both empaths, but we kept it between us. Well, everyone got to talking, and it turned out that his stepmother, stepsister, and childhood friend were all empaths too. We had an odd feeling about the basement, so everyone went down and we turned the lights off and sat in circle holding hands. One by one, we started asking questions. A figure appeared a few minutes in and started walking by the five of us. I was possessed at one point, and my face changed as it began talking through me. We caught it all on recording. Afterward, we heard pacing on the top floor, and whatever was down in the basement with us started presenting itself as different people that were staying in the cabin. We could hear tapping on the window and concrete walls, as well as see figures outside. Red eyes would appear outside, and we would be chased to different areas of the house. Before everyone went home, we blessed the cabin with sage and holy oil. As I was placing the holy oil on various parts of the basement, the hand I was touching began to burn and turn red. I almost passed out. The last time we came up there, my fiance's stepbrother had me come downstairs to see the crosses that were still on the clock. There's the only ones left. After we opened the clock, activity picked up again. Feels like a never-ending cycle. Please help.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
I first learned of the supernatural through a Frank Edwards book. It started out with someone on their deathbed talking to deceased relatives and proceeded with about 20 more stories. I was freaked out a bit and talked with my mom, who told me that nothing was really proven, and a few of the stories were probably made up to boot. In the following few years, there were enough articles and even other books disputing all things paranormal, including a story or two I had read about. I became more skeptical. A few years later, my grandmother died. We were 800 miles away and started making plans to join my dad, who had stayed with her in her last days. The night she died, I was in my bed in a bedroom I shared with my two younger brothers when this happened. Our door was open to the hallway, which was lit, but dim enough not to bother me, who was nearest to the door. I was laying in bed and ready to nod off, when something I can only describe as a faint feather or leaf of light came floating into our room. To this day, I'm still not sure what it was, and I'm not 100% my mind wasn't playing tricks on me, but I know I saw something. I'm questioning it to myself all this time, but watching nonetheless. It floated into the room and paused at the foot of my bed for a few seconds. It did the same for my middle brother, and then proceeded to my youngest brother, who was the farthest from the door. It paused at the foot of my youngest brother's bed for a second, and then headed towards his head. It looked like it paused there, and then it was gone. I laid there thinking for a few minutes, and then kind of faded off somewhat offhandedly, thinking she had tucked him in. I never told anybody about it, because I wasn't sure what I'd seen, and nobody would believe me anyway, so I left it. About 40 years later, I'm talking to my mom, and out of nowhere she says, "You do know that your grandmother visited you, your youngest brother, on the night she died, don't you?" I was blown away and didn't even answer. I was just stunned. My youngest brother and I were never close and never talked about anything. He'd also moved about 700 miles east. We re-established contact about 2 years before he died and got on good terms. One night on the phone, I asked him about it, and it turns out we had seen about the same thing. He described it as a feather of light too. I told him my version about how she stopped at the foot of each bed, but when it came to him, how she had floated up to the head of his. I told him I thought she was tucking him in. He said, "Hell, I thought she was trying to smother me." It was our last huge laugh before life caught up with us both. I still question that night, but little bro was spot on with what happened. I'm praying now he can ask her in person and get back to me one day.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
So this happened about 2 or 3 years ago in my home in Massachusetts. I'm currently in the army and I'm in Korea. And a lot of time alone in your room gives you a lot of time to think back on how life used to be. But I digress. Anyways, there was this one night in my home I'll never forget. I was playing Battlefield with 3 friends of mine, late into the night. I told my friends I'd be going to bed, shut off my Xbox, and started walking down the stairs to take a leak before I actually laid down to fall asleep. I should add that the time was around 4 AM, but to this day, I swear I wasn't the least bit tired, after multiple monsters and rock stars. I was halfway down my stairs when I saw a pale face peeking around the corner back up at me. The face was coming from the left side of the hall, opposite to the bathroom. The face has really sunken eyes, like 2 black holes almost, and no mouth. No slit, no hole, nothing for a mouth. I looked at it blankly for a second, and it just disappeared. I didn't blink or anything in those few seconds, almost as if it just dissipated into emptiness. I sat there for at least a minute, and without a second thought, I turned around, went back to my room, and fell right asleep. Now what confuses me is the fact that I didn't have any real reaction to it. I just simply looked at it, went, and went back to my room. To be completely honest, it felt almost calming once I saw whatever it was. I had a feeling of, everything will be okay. I always thought this was an interesting little tale to tell all my friends when talking about ghost stories. Thus my decision to share. It should be fair to add that there have been some paranormal things that have happened in my own home, but nobody shared a story in my household concerning an all-white face.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
So usually I'm the one telling the stories, but this time I need some help. This one isn't my story, but my mum's. She experienced this last night. This is how she described the encounter to me. My bedroom door was closed, but my closet door was open. I woke up to go to the bathroom and closed my door behind me. Then I went to the living room for a drink of water. Our cat was asleep on the couch, all cold. Then I returned to my bedroom and closed the door to keep our cat from coming into my room, as I'm allergic. I sat on the bed and then saw something go into her open bedroom closet, thinking it was the cat squeezing in without being seen. She called my cat with no response and then grabbed the cat from the closet. The second she grabbed the back end, she realised that this was fatter than my cat. Not much, but enough to notice. She saw the tail, whole back end, and then ran further into the closet. Black cat. I then went into the living room and closed my door behind me to check on the cat, and she watched her jump off the couch after waking up from a solid sleep. I then went back to my room, leaving the door open this time. Definitely too big for a rat or mouse. It was 100% a cat, or cat form. Then I went into the living room again and shut my door to keep the cat out, who then came running toward me, meowing. She left her door open for the cat and went back to sleep. She's been super drained the last few days, and I've been slightly more tired and lazy than usual. She's been sleeping for 12 plus hours for the last 4 days or so. She then went back to bed with the door open and slept from 9:30 till 4, out like a light. There is zero way this was my cat. There was also zero time for her to somehow run past my mum without seeing her, somehow get through a closed door that she didn't even have time to reach, multiple times at that. My mum's room. She closed the door right behind her, and as I mentioned, my cat was passed out on the couch. I'm not sure if this related, but my mum and I are both very open. So I was thinking it could be an imp or familiar, but after some research, I now know they only present themselves in solid animal form. It's not something that scared her, or even me when she told this story. Plus it ran away from her. I've seen black cats here before, but only ever out the corner of my eye very quickly. Usually only maybe a second and then they're gone. This is the first time there's been a tangible experience or spirit or whatever it is. If anyone thinks they know what this is, please let me know.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
When I was about 6, I lived in a really old town in Pennsylvania that had a lot of history back in the 1800s. My dad and I used to go for walks in the evening and always made sure to pass by the house that we were sure was haunted. Real creepy ass house with the paint peeling and everything. No one had lived in it for a while. Being in a horror-obsessed family, I was fascinated by it, and my dad and I would even take turns going up into the porch and opening the mail slot to look in. God, it was creepy in there. It really had a feeling. Naturally, we loved it. So fast forward about a year ago, I was at a playground with a crazy family friend and her daughter. A playground which, I must add, was right behind the street the house was on. You could even see into the backyard if you got close enough. I told them that the house was haunted and convinced them to come with me so I could show them. On the porch, me and the mum went up and opened the mail slot to look in. Right away, a tiny, very old sheet of paper flew out of the slot, like it had been blown out by the wind. The woman picked it up and went pale. It seemed to be a sheet of music, stained in yellow, with lyrics among the bars of notes. And the lyrics were the same word over and over again, across the whole page. My. I thought it was kind of funny at the time. Mom was scared though. We threw the sheet of music off the porch and it landed in the flower bed. Even though I laughed, I was terrified days later. I felt like the house didn't want me to go near it anymore. I'd be scared every time I walked past it and saw the yellowed sheet of music lying in that same flower bed. And I just felt cold seeing the house, knowing I wasn't welcome there. Still freaks me out to this day.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Once my friend and I were heading from Venice to Punta Gorda in my old Dodge minivan. Simple enough drive, but it goes through a part of central Florida which is almost completely empty. Because fuck it, late night road trip to deliver a QP and less cops. We drove on those non-lined roads, and when we came to where we were supposed to meet with a buddy of mine, the road had a police roadblock. In the middle of butt-fuck nowhere. Fuck, definitely can't go that way. So we detour around some roads in an attempt to get another way. Big mistake, as we were running low on gas. I swear we were below the entire time. The road we took to get away from the cops ended up being around. You have to drive about 70 miles to even get to the next street. I should also mention these roads are absolutely straight for the most part, and we haven't seen another car besides the cops for an hour. No giant turns, and if anything, there were just spots of woodland that gave into giant open fields that extended for miles in all directions. As we're coming around this small bend out of a woodland area into a field, we see a big rig travelling at normal speed, and we're going to catch up to him, I realise. We're probably about a mile behind him, but we can still see the headlights and everything. As we go around another slight bend in the field, we lose sight of him until we come up to the straightaway. Except that when we got to the straight, there was no trucker. There was no truck anywhere to be seen. This isn't a type of place where you can just pull off the side behind some trees and be lost to an observer. There were no trees or anything to hide a giant big rig. It was an open field and this giant truck absolutely vanished, without trace. There was no possible explanation, and both my friend and I were super spooked and made haste to get the fuck out of there. Finally, somehow, made it to Lafayette and there was a gas station open. Thank Christ. Filled up, got the fuck out of there and delivered our bag with much sketchiness. But if you're driving out in Punta Gorda at 2 a.m, don't.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
My junior year of college, I lived with a good friend of mine. We had been friends since high school and lived together the semester before when she transferred to my school. She was a year above me, so this was her senior year. I had just gotten out of a 4-year relationship and began dating someone new when my roommate and I moved into our apartment. This was both of our first times living off campus and not with our parents. We were excited to decorate and not have to worry about the campus rules. We lived rent-free in this apartment because we took care of a boy with Down syndrome. His parents were very well off and allowed us to live there cost-free, as long as we helped him with his night and morning routine, and of course made sure he was safe. The boy went to our university as part of a special education program. There were about 50 students with disabilities enrolled. His parents lived close as he was local. He actually lived a block from his old high school, so we felt very comfortable in the community. Our apartment was a home converted into an upstairs and downstairs apartment. He lived downstairs while we lived upstairs. There were doors at every entryway, so we could not just come upstairs into our apartment whenever. We had to go through 2 separate doors. When moving in, I did feel a bit eerie, feeling something was touching me. I brushed it off because I am dramatic and think every place that was built before 1980 is haunted. We move in and everything seems great. The new guy I'm seeing stays over every night, practically moving in. My roommate's boyfriend stays over as well. Her boyfriend had something about him. He just gave off bad energy and was always mad. I actually dated him in my freshman year of high school. He was emotionally abusive, to say the least. It wasn't weird that they dated, as they didn't begin speaking until they were in college, and I had been with other people. He was not only emotionally abusive to her, but physical as well. I knew living with her it was inevitable that he'd be around, but he was there 24/7. I had no room to complain, so was my boyfriend. I found out I was pregnant only a month into my junior year. I was terrified, but excited for a new chapter. I noticed more things happening, such as doors open that I closed, lights on that I shut off, and things moved. Pregnant women can draw in spirits as they're harbouring not only their energy, but a new innocent energy as well. I try to ignore what I see. I often spend time downstairs in the other apartment, even if it's as though the caregivers are on duty. I notice her boyfriend becoming more irritable, but he's the least of my worries. I'm a young mom. We'd often see black shadows under our door at night if the hall light was on, like footprints, almost that would walk down the hall towards the bathroom. I began sleeping on the side of the bed that did not have visibility of the door. I slept so much better. One time, I was washing the dishes in the kitchen when I began to feel very lightheaded. I saw out of the corner of my eye a tall, dark figure, almost cloud-like but thin, and touched the floor. It was watching me do the dishes. When I turned to look, it disappeared, and for a split second I blacked out, and caught myself on the sink before I could fall. I blame it on the pregnancy, that maybe I was dehydrated, or didn't have enough to eat. The place was small. You really couldn't rearrange much, as everything fit perfectly how it was. We tried, though. We both liked to rearrange and try new seating arrangements in the living room. The couch was against the wall, but we wanted something new. We moved it up closer to the TV, and now you walked behind the couch to get to the kitchen. We liked it for the time being. While pregnant, I was tired. I rarely napped most of my life. I was always on the go and truly too busy. Being pregnant, I didn't care. I'd be a day late on an assignment I was getting that nap in. One day, I was napping on a newly moved couch. Just my boyfriend and I were home at the time. I was sleeping, but not in a deep sleep. The TV was on low. I heard from behind the couch someone whisper my name. My boyfriend knew how I felt about ghosts in the apartment, so instantly I'm yelling at him, "Leave me alone, I'm trying to sleep." I heard his voice come from our room. He was playing some game on his PS4, and he was nowhere near me. There's no way he could have whispered for me to hear that, especially behind me. There was no way he could have done that, then went back to the room, that quickly and without making a noise. Days pass, I forget. At least attempt to forget what happened along with the other little things. I'm in class talking to a peer who happens to come to the downstairs apartment twice a week to help the boy as well. We're talking about the apartment and how it creeps her out. The downstairs apartment has a fireplace that isn't used in the living room. She told me one time when she was watching him, she saw a black mass of some kind fly out from the fireplace and round the corner like it was heading up to my apartment. I was home the day she was talking about. I didn't see anything but her telling me that freaked her out. My roommate and her boyfriend were very toxic. They fought constantly. He was taking her money out of her bag when she wasn't looking. She ended up getting a camera in her room to see what goes on when she's not around. She ended up catching an orb or two coming out of camera, and sounds would trigger the camera to start recording, but nothing was caught on tape. One of my final experiences there was when I was downstairs chatting with my roommate and another girl who helped the boy. We were discussing his upcoming schedule, who worked, and just gossiping. As we were talking, my boyfriend called. Annoyed because I'm floor below, why did he need to call? I answer with a, "What? I'm literally in the same house, why are you calling me?" He couldn't tell me, he just begged me to come upstairs. He was alone at the time. I came up and asked what was wrong. He'd been eating when he saw something watching him in the doorway. He quickly looked up because he thought I was trying to scare him. When he did, he saw a tall black shadow standing there, long enough for him to see it, and it ran towards our room. He didn't move, he was so frightened. I thought, wow, okay, maybe I wasn't seeing things. I definitely did see something watching me that day. A few days later, my roommate and her boyfriend got in such a bad physical altercation, I made my boyfriend call the police. He was 5'6" and over 200 pounds. She was only 4'8" and maybe 90 pounds. I was worried for her and honestly myself. At this point I was 6 months pregnant. He was arrested and she put a PFA on him. He never came back to the house again, and I really can't remember seeing or experiencing anything after that. Things did feel a little better. Was the house haunted? I think so. But by how many spirits? Maybe a friendly one. But whatever was watching us was dark. My friend and I often discussed that maybe her ex-boyfriend had something dark attached to him, as he was and still is abusive towards every girlfriend he's had, but also just an angry person in general.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal M.com.
When I was 14 years old, my mum lived in an old townhouse. She moved just a year before from another old townhouse that she lived in since I was 5. I went to my mum's every other weekend, and every other week in the summer, as I was full-time living with my dad. At the time, my older sister and 2 of my younger brothers lived in the home with her. I felt eerie every time I walked in. The home was fairly updated. I was unsure I felt so heavy in there all the time. I began to notice small things, such as things being moved and doors being open when I remember shutting them. The more often I was there, the more I noticed things. My youngest brother at the time was 5 years old. He has autism, however, he's very high functioning and most people at the time did not realise that he was on the spectrum. He began acting odd, talking to people that weren't there. His closet was small, just a hanging rack really, but there was more room despite deep inside the closet. Only he could fit in there. He was often found sitting in the back of the closet with the door closed, talking to his friend Roger. I was creeped out, but my mum thought it was cute. They say individuals with autism can be sensitive to spirits, especially a child. It became more frequent, but I was barely there. I lived with my dad, so I was with my mum's maybe 3 or 4 days out of the month during the school year. I didn't see everything. My mum asked one day for me to watch the boys, even though my sister was 17. I was more reliable, so I always had to watch my brothers when my mum worked. I'd sleep in bed with my mum because I was scared to sleep in my sister's room, and I didn't have my own. One early summer morning, my mum woke me up to watch the boys. I heard the back door close and I knew she left. I got up because my 5-year-old brother would be up and getting into things. Her room was at one end of the hall and the bathroom was at the other. In between were my brother's room, the stairs to the first floor, and my sister's room in that order. I walk out and see the bathroom door is closed. I check my brother's room. My 8-year-old brother is sleeping. I check my sister's room. I see her and her friend are still sleeping. I look forward again before going downstairs, and the bathroom door is then open. I know this is something small, but it's the first experience I remember in that house. A few days later, I was still at my mum's and it was summer. My sister was in summer school, so her and boyfriend waited at our house for her to come home. Both my brothers went to daycare today, and my mum was at work. It was just the 3 of us in the living room. We turned on the TV and watched Titanic. It's quiet as we're all very into the movie, when all of a sudden the basement door flies out and hits the door frame so hard it slams back shut. It's a calm summer day, no wind. The only windows in the basement are very small and couldn't be opened. No one ever went down there, so why would the windows be open anyway? This freaked us all out because we couldn't focus on the movie after that. My mum later said that it was the wind, but we knew it wasn't. A couple weeks later, school started again, so every other weekend I stay at my mom's. My sister and I were on the couch downstairs in the living room. I was fighting my sleep. I did not want to fall asleep downstairs. My sister was on a laptop on Facebook. It's after midnight and I'm beat. I say at least 4 times, "Please wake me up before you go to your room." She told me to shut the bleep up, and she would. I fell asleep while watching Nick at Night. Around 3 a.m, I'm woken to the sound of static on the TV and the TV turning off. Do TVs even do that anymore? I'm freaked out, but I try to remain calm and quickly turn the TV back on. It's an old house. Maybe the TV just does that. Married with Children comes on the TV once again. I was too scared to move and go upstairs, and I was really tired. I told myself it was nothing and to go back to sleep. The same exact thing happened again. I turned on all the lights and ran upstairs. I jumped onto the bed with my sister. She yelled at me for kicking her and told me to turn off the lights. I said, "Fuck no." I was not moving again. She went to shut them off. I turned on a TV. Once again, Married with Children was on. I felt like being in there, and maybe it was a freak accident. The same exact thing happened again. The TV made the static noise with the screen glitching, and it shut off. At the same moment, her closet door flung open. I ran for my mom's room and stayed in there the rest of the night. I started only being in the rooms with other people. I was always on edge, and everything scared me. My final experience that is notable was when I was about to take a shower. I was watching my youngest brother upstairs, and everyone else was downstairs, including a few of her boyfriend's friends. One in particular used to flirt with me. My mom recently opened the bathroom door so hard that it came off the hinges. Now, you had to prop the door open against the frame to have some privacy. I was getting undressed, and my little brother was using the bathroom, when suddenly the bathroom door fell onto my back. I instantly thought it was my sister's boyfriend, and scrambled to get dressed. He was a little creepy, so I wasn't sure what he'd do. My brother begins to laugh, and I say, "Who was that?" And he says, still laughing, "It was Roger." Shortly after that, my mom's lease was up, and she moved to a new home. The house is still vacated to this day.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
About 8 years ago now, my dad did woodwork and refurbished an old 1800s wardrobe, and he decided it would look good in their bedroom, which it did. About 2 nights after it being in my mother's room, she started to complain that it was eerie, and she had a bad feeling about it. I remember her saying that about a week later, it started opening itself in the night, and she could see a person in it, and that he talked to her. Of course, my dad didn't believe her and kept it in the room, and it just got worse. The house started smelling and the air was damp in my parents' room, and they didn't know where it came from, so they decided to look for mold. But they couldn't find any, so they just went on cleaning and spraying stuff to make it smell nice. About 3 months later, the activities got worse. The whole house was affected by it, and the doors in the house would unlock themselves. Shelves would open by themselves, and the cups my mother drank from would always be broken when she woke up. This had all obviously scared my mom, and she decided to sell the wardrobe. It ended up in the hands of 2 people who a week later sold it on eBay. We don't know where it is now for obvious reasons. I forgot to add, my dad, when he refurbished it, found a panel under the wardrobe where a little red box that was really dusty laid. Curiosity hit, and they opened it. Inside was an old cufflink button, a love letter to a woman that was written in Swedish, and a strand of hair that my mother thought was off a horse, because she kept horses, and when one had passed she would keep a strand of the horse's hair. Obviously, they put it back in the box and tried to find whose it was. They had no luck in finding who the box belonged to, so they ended up putting it back where they found it in the wardrobe.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
A little backstory on my mama. She was in the 6th grade when she left school to go to work, cleaning for a rich family that lived in Williamson, West Virginia. She was raised hard, but was the best woman I've ever known. She instilled in me honesty, work ethic, and many other wonderful things. She left me in 2016, and I miss her. Here's a little piece of her, People's For You. This story was told in our family when I was growing up. It used to scare me so bad. Anyway, my mama swore it was the truth, and she was not known to tell lies, and I should know, because it was just me and her when I was growing up. She was born and raised in a very rural and poor area of West Virginia. Her and her 7 or 8 brothers and sisters were very poor. Because of this, and because it was many what country people did, her father raised a garden. Now my mama nearly idolized her father and would go with him the distance from their house to the garden spot, which was a good piece off. This required that they push a wagon with wooden wheels past their neighbour's house. My mama was terrified of the old woman that lived beside them. Mama said they called her Aunt Kate. She was older and apparently had cataracts because Mama said her eyes were white. Mama said this particular summer was extremely hot, and that she and her father had spent a good bit of time in the garden tending the vegetables and picking what was ready. As they pushed this big wagon up and in front of Aunt Kate's house, the old woman came out and yelled, "Harrison, give me some of the beans you got there." My great-grandfather responded, "Kate, we worked hard for them beans. We ain't giving them away." The old woman laughed and said they would regret their decision. The two proceeded up the hill to their home and went about chores and other required duties. Mama said that she thought nothing more of it until it was time to sleep. According to my mama, with so many kids, some shared the bed and some on the floor, where they slept with minimal coverings. Mama said that she was drifting off to sleep when she heard someone or thing walk towards the room where she was sleeping. Knowing the sounds of the home, she didn't recognize who or what it could be. Mama always talked about how her father would tell them stories to scare them into being good. Due to this, she was easily scared. As the walking got closer, she reported covering her head and laying still terrified of who or what was standing in the doorway. Mama reported that, whatever it was, would turn and walk out the room and back down the hallway. All night long. Mama said she lay there all night terrified and scared to take her head out from under the blanket. The next morning as the sun arose, the thing stopped. She stated that she then heard the familiar sound of her father walking quickly to dress. Once she bolstered enough bravery, she immediately darted down the hallway and into the kitchen, where her father was placing green beans into a sack. The two did not speak, but walked quickly out the door and down the hill to Aunt Kate's house with the sack full of beans. Mama said old Aunt Kate was already out sitting on a porch as if waiting for them to arrive. Her father said, "Old woman, take your bugger back." And Aunt Kate started laughing and telling them, "Don't worry, Harrison, it won't bother you no more." Mama told other things that Aunt Kate did that alluded to her being someone familiar with the dark side. Mama was a very honest Christian lady, and I never remember a time where I caught her in a lie, or even heard her curse and she swore.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
When I was about 4, my grandparents moved out of their old house and moved into the house we live in now. They sold their house quicker than expected, meaning they were in a time crunch to find a new house. They did the first showing of a house and everything was normal. They were interested and returned the next day for a second walkthrough and found a dead crow in the living room. The doors, windows and chimney were closed and locked, and they had no idea how this crow had gotten inside, let alone died. They looked past that and bought the house. On the first day in the house, my grandma and I were going to sleep in the living room, and my grandpa was going to sleep with the dog in the master bedroom. At about 11 in the night, my grandma got up to go to the bathroom, and not long after, I followed her to tell her that there was a man in the living room that wanted to talk to her. Again, I have no recollection of this. Obviously freaked out, she checked all the doors and windows that were locked, and she had no clue how someone could have gotten in. The next morning, at about 4 a.m, the dog woke my grandma and I up by licking our faces. When my grandma asked my grandpa why she let the dog out of the room, he told her he hadn't been out of bed yet and had no idea how the dog got out. I also had a magnet that you had to push to light up. The only way it would light up is if you pushed it. My grandma came home from work one day to find the magnet lighting up on the fridge. She said she sat on the porch until my grandpa got home because she was too scared to go inside by herself. Over the next couple of weeks, strange things would happen, like the overturning on and off, the TV turning on and off, and we always smelled whiskey and cigars, despite no one smoking cigars in the house. and my grandma always had the sense she was being watched. After they were completely settled in and everything was finalised, one day while my grandpa was doing yard work, a neighbour walked up and asked him, "Has weird stuff been happening in your house?" And Grandpa responded, "Yes. How do you know?" To which the neighbour replied, "The last owner died of alcohol poisoning in the master bedroom. The house was sold by the homeowner's mom, so she was never required to disclose that information. Sometimes we'll get hints of the ghost, but other than that, he's pretty quiet. If we talk about it, a door will open or something, but he's thankfully pretty friendly overall."
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
A little information. My best friend has a ghost attachment. It's been with her family for years. We're still trying to figure out what it is and how to get rid of it. But needless to say, the time I've been friends with her, I've encountered so much activity. This just happened to be one of the creepiest. So my friend and I moved in with each other into a basement suite. We were both pretty broke at the time, so it was only one bedroom. I took up residence on the couch and slept in the living room, which made it my bedroom. Our suite is shaped like an L. You walk in, you're in the kitchen. On the other side of the room is the living room. Beside that is the laundry room, which is connected to my friend's room, and the bathroom. Hopefully that description made some sense. So one night, I had settled down for the evening. I'm the type to have to contemplate the meaning of life, so I can fall asleep. I started hearing soft taps coming from the living room. They were slow, but then it got to the living and I heard an unmistakable sound of footsteps. We had cheap laminate flooring, which accentuated every step the thing took. I could tell it was trying to be quiet, and once it made it to the middle of the 3 living rooms, it stopped. I became very aware of a presence and I felt like I was being watched. I absolutely refused to open my eyes. I thought if I pretended I didn't hear anything, it would leave me alone. After a long time of tense silence, I somehow fell asleep and woke up the next morning rather confused. I know for a fact those footsteps weren't from my roommate. I've known her long enough to recognise her footsteps. These ones were different. I kind of regret not opening my eyes, but I'm glad too. It was pitch black in the living room. I'm not sure I'd even be able to see it, even if it was standing there. That's the only time I've ever heard footsteps, but damn, it was creepy. Probably one of the creepiest things that's happened to me to date.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Back in 2018, I had just turned 20 and wanted to splurge for my birthday. So I invited a few friends to paintball, including my old friend Rain, her boyfriend Jackie, my boyfriend who I'll call Fred, and my best friend Evie. We all met at a nearby mall and crammed into Rain's car. She had offered to drive us all. I don't know if this was connected, but my boyfriend said something weird. We were on the highway when he turned to Rain and said, "Hey, can you slow down? I have a bad feeling that something bad is going to happen." Which was strange to ask, but Rain obliged and slowed down to the speed limit. We made it to the paintballing place without any issues and proceeded to have a great time. Fred even shot me in the spine, which hurt up until the next day. Eventually, it was nearing the end of the day and we were all tired, so we all agreed it was time to go. But Rain suggested we all book a hotel room and spend the night together. But Fred and Jackie said no. They were both tired and wanted to go home, which left us girls to hang out instead. So we found a pretty run-down motel for cheap and spent a few hours watching horror movies. Halfway through the second movie, we started to feel like there was a presence in the room with us, but we chalked it up to the horror movies. Now, a fun fact about Evie. She has an attachment. A shadow figure has been haunting her family for years. It started with her mom and weirdly got passed down to her. That night, when feeling the presence, neither Evie nor I thought it was her ghost friend. Like I previously said, we just thought it was our nerves from the horror movies. After we all finished the film, we all decided it was best to go to bed. The presence we were feeling was getting a little too much for us. The air felt heavy, and whatever was in the room with us felt angry. We assumed sleeping would help eliminate the feeling of being watched and the overall nasty gut feeling we got. Evie and I shared a bed while Rain took up the other. I usually have a hard time falling asleep in a new environment, but at that moment, I was having a more challenging time than usual. The odd time I did manage to doze off, I'd have these strange dreams of swirling shadows. No actual shape to them, just whirlpools of darkness. On the other hand, Rain seemed like she had a fantastic dream. She was moaning and making a lot of noise overall. Well, that mindset changed when she got up and gasped for air. I sprung up myself and asked her what was wrong. That's when she started telling me about her dream. In her dream, she was being pursued by a shadow figure. She recalled how terrified she felt, hence the moaning, and no matter how fast she ran, the thing would catch up to her. Eventually, it knocked her to the ground, like it was fed up with the chase, and wrapped its fingers around her throat. She couldn't breathe and started thrashing around, trying to break free from its grasp. But nothing worked. Rain could feel herself dying. She thought that was the end. But luckily, she woke up before she died. As she was telling me this, I turned on the light, and Evie had woken up and was listening to her retell her nightmare. During her recollection, I noticed red marks forming on her neck, same as her wrists, arms, and legs. Just about any visible patch of skin had some form of mark on it. I pointed it out to her, and once she finished her story and asked if she usually woke up with bruises and marks on her, Rain looked somewhat startled and said no. The three of us decided it was probably time for us to leave, and we hastily packed our bags and piled into Rain's car. We started to feel better once we were far from the motel. Evie and I began to tell her about the shadow figure that haunted Evie, and I told her it had once threatened my life in a dream, but never physically attacked us. Rain nervously laughed it off, and took it as a cue to drop the subject. Rain and I don't talk anymore. I've moved across the country. And we fell out of touch. But I'll never forget the look of fear as she recalled her dream to us. The shadow figure still haunts Evie and I, but it has never tried to strangle someone in a dream, at least that we know of.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
So back at my mum's house, my room was in the basement, and the only way to get into the furnace room was through my room. The way my bed was set up, when I was on my side, I could see directly into the furnace room, because there was no door separating my room and the furnace room. So one night, when I was laying in bed, I saw a cat walk out of the furnace room and kind of look around my room, and after I blinked it was gone. So after that, I talked to one of my friends whose family was friends with the people we bought the house from, and she told me that their cat actually died in the house. I'm not sure if it died in my room or not though. Another time I was suffering from an ear infection, but my mum would never believe me when I told her I was having problems. She always thought I was doing it for attention, or being dramatic. So again, I was laying in bed not being able to do anything because of the pain, and there's a possibility I was hallucinating from the pain, but I saw a man standing in my doorway. He was around average height, but he was built and had wide shoulders, and I was watching him for about 10 seconds when I heard a deep man's voice ask me if I was okay. I didn't feel scared. It almost lessened the pain, and I fell asleep around a day or two later. My mom told me that she woke up to a man standing at the foot of her bed, and she felt him tapping her foot. She told the man to go away, and after she said that, she felt like she was being pushed into the bed. When she was describing the man, it matched exactly the man I saw. The way my house was, you walk down the stairs, and then there was another staircase with like 4 stairs you went down, and that's where the furnace room, my room, and the laundry room was. So one night when I was in bed, I was looking at the laundry room, which was open, and I saw a woman walk in wearing a white dress. I remember her being pretty and not creepy at all, so I walked into the laundry room, and it was empty. So I went upstairs in the living room, because my stepdad was still awake watching TV. So I told him what happened, and he said he saw the same woman walk downstairs. One time, when I was home alone, I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and it was a couple days after my brother's birthday, so we had one of those helium balloons in this room upstairs. So I was watching TV when I see the balloon floating down the stairs, and it stops right in front of me, like something was trying to play with me. At first, I thought it could have just been an open window, but I realised that all the windows were closed, and it had to have left this room float down the stairs and turn towards me and stop, which kind of freaked me out. So I told my parents, but they just laughed at me for getting freaked out by a balloon. But a couple days later, the same thing happened to them. But the weird part was, they were sitting in different seats than I was, so I don't think it was a draft or anything. The last story freaked me out the most, but could also be in my imagination. I'm not sure. So one night, I was in bed, and my stepdad built a wall to cover the furnace room door in my room, and then made a doorway outside my room in the hallway, so it was easier to get in. So as I'm laying there, I can see a shape of a person peeking in my room, and then quickly ducking back into the furnace room. I watched whatever it was do that for around 10 minutes, but the weird part, it was really dark in my room. But whatever it was darker than the full darkness, if that makes sense. I only saw that thing one time, so I don't know if it was me imagining or not.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal M.com.
I don't usually share anything like this on social media, but to cut to the chase, on Friday, my grandparents and I were talking about random stuff in the dining room. It was 1:40 in the afternoon, and it was just the three of us. My mother and brother were at work. Someone knocks on the front door, so naturally my grandfather gets up and makes his way to the door. It's unusual for anyone to not use the doorbell. My grandmother questioned my grandfather, who was at the door when he came back. He said there was no one. He looked around and didn't see any delivery vehicles or people walking away. A very long pathway to our door from the driveway. I got chills when he mentioned that because my grandmother began to freak out, explaining to him that opening doors after someone knocks and no one is usually letting a spirit in or whatever into the house. My family is religious, by the way. What gets me really concerned is that he said that this has been happening for a couple months, and each time he checks the door, there's always no one. We've been having paranormal activity happening around the house in the past week and a half, and I wonder why we're having these problems now. Is whatever my grandfather has led into the house, is it now revealing itself? I've been really on edge from all the other experiences that I've been having around the house, and my family have tried many things to guide it away. This entity has been following me around. Some experiences have happened at my job and at friends' houses that can't be explained.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal M.com.
I'll preface this by saying that I've had many paranormal encounters since I was young, and many were also witnessed by the people I was living with or confirmed by neighbours. We had fallen on some tough times financially, and the only real affordable housing where my son could remain at his current school he loved was some really old apartments. The complex was built in the 1950s and was run down. It was a 2-2 split floor plan. My husband and I took the master bedroom with the bathroom inside the master. Separate room though. The bedroom was always freezing. I could never stay warm, even though it's Texas. And being from Wisconsin, I know what real cold is. The other rooms in the apartment were at normal temperature. I never felt comfortable being alone in the apartment, mostly because I never felt alone. The living room wall with the TV on it was also our bedroom wall and door. We always kept the bedroom door shut. I was in the living room watching TV alone. The spot I always sat in, I swear I could see or hear the bedroom door knob rattle, like a gust of wind had been blown at it. Our AC unit was at the other end of the apartment, and there were no vents or windows anywhere near the bedroom door. There was a coat closet door adjacent to the bedroom door in the entryway, and it never did the same thing, just the bedroom doorknob rattled. We lived on the second floor of a 2-story complex, so no one was above us. The people below us were incredibly quiet people. I never once heard them at all, let alone slamming doors or windows that would have affected us. I was again sitting on the couch facing the bedroom door, reading this time, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a human-sized black shadow. It crossed from the entryway, past the coat closet door, and went right through the bedroom door, rattling the doorknob. I took my glasses off and tried to refocus, thinking there must be a smear or something on my glasses. There was nothing. I got up and went into the bedroom, and nothing was there. About a week later, the same thing happened, but this time the shadow was only 2 or 3 feet high. Same path from the entryway, coat closet, and right through the bedroom door with the handle rattling again. Got up, went into the bedroom, and nothing was there. A few days later, I caught it again out of the corner of my eye, but it was just standing there full size in the entryway, like it had been watching me. I only caught a glimpse this time before it disappeared, and this time I saw purple in its face. Like purple eyes? Although it could have been a scarf. A hat? I wasn't usually ever alone in the evenings, but my husband and son were both gone one night. I was watching TV in the living room and felt really anxious, like I wasn't alone. The bedroom door handle started rattling along with the door shaking some this time. I started getting pretty freaked out. I knew I needed to go check things out. I got up, enough courage, knowing that I had to go into the bedroom and that the light switches are in the room, not next to the door. And I needed to use our bathroom, which took going into the dark room to get the lights turned on. I took some deep breaths and opened the bedroom door. And as I went straight to the bathroom door in the dark, opened it up, I reached around to let the flip on the light switch. What I felt instead in the dark was my hand go through some wet surface I can only compare to jello-ish, or like hair gel. I was shocked, flipped on the light, and went to grab the hand towel off the rack, completely expecting my whole hand to be soaked in something. It was dry as a bone. There was nothing different about the bedroom or bathroom yet again, and the sensation of the gel stuff on my hand was gone. My middle daughter was over a few weeks later, sitting at my vanity in our bedroom, which was next to the bedroom door. I told her of my experiences, and others. She's sensitive to energy too. I was getting dressed and she was putting on makeup as we were going out. She said, "Mom, the shadow just walked through the door past me and into the bathroom. It looked like an old woman." She was the only one who had ever seen it besides me. We actually ended up swapping bedrooms so my son could have the larger master bedroom room to have friends over to play video games. After we switched bedrooms, I never saw the shadow again, and the other bedroom was always reasonably warm. To this day, I'm not sure what I put my hand into that night. I have an idea, but without proof, and being alone that night, they're only ideas. We moved a few months later. Never seen the black shadow again.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
The fact that my dad remembers is the scariest thing about this story. When I was a kid, I remember having a lot of "I just saw X, Daddy" episodes. UFOs, moving snowmen, a lizard man, whatever. My dad, often by my side, would correct me or clarify what I was seeing. So when I had a weird encounter while he was with me, it freaked us both out. About 15 to 20 years ago, we were driving by a horse farm near his old house. The road hugged the farm perimeter and ascended a small hill that paralleled the driveway. The end result was that the driveway was about 20 to 30 feet before the crest of the hill. As we approached the crest, we heard the screaming of kids and immediately saw a handful of children come running over the crest and beeline into the driveway. Something was off with the kids. I don't want to say they seemed actually scared, because I saw them for only a few seconds, but they didn't look like they were playing. As we passed, my dad muttered something along the lines of, "That's weird," while watching the kids run down the driveway. As we crested the hill, we realised that what they were running from, just off the side of the road, was the weirdest looking animal I've ever seen. It was like a cross between a goat, a coyote, and a nightmare. It was bigger than any coyote I've seen, with a shaggy coat like a mountain goat, a complete bald head, looked almost like a feline face, cloven feet, and no tail. We both were speechless as we drove by, and within 4 or 5 seconds, the road continued to turn, and it was out of sight. At this point, it's only registering what I saw, so I just ask out loud, "What the hell was that?" To which my dad immediately shouts, "I don't fucking know, just don't stop." He was terrified, and that made me terrified. No idea what we saw, but he still won't really talk about it, instead just calling it a chupacabra in an attempt to make a joke out of it. Sometimes I think of it at the most random times and it creeps me out. I've seen weirder stuff, but this is the one that I'm 100% sure happened, as I remembered it, because my dad was there and experienced it with me.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
I feel like now that I'm growing up, I'm starting to feel the gravity of many things that happen and have happened around me. Being a curious person, I like to investigate things, like to make my own theories around them. Yesterday morning, I started having this conversation with my mum about my theories on what dreams actually are and what science says about it. In the midst of that conversation, I suddenly recalled an incident that happened with her many years ago. My mum is not at all a person who likes to make things up. She's always so skeptical of superstitions, and only I know that if she claims to be watching something with her own eyes, which freaked her out and almost froze her to death, she's speaking the truth. It happened around 12 years ago. My family was going through a financial crisis, and we used to live in my maternal grandma's house back then. Recently, a thief had also been sighted into the house, who ran away in panic because of the fear of being caught. Many scary things were happening, and we were damn serious towards all of them, as they were causing our family a lot of stress. I didn't get to know exactly when and how, but one evening, my mum told my grandma that she saw a hairy demon in the bathroom, and almost froze to death seeing that. As I was a stupid 11-year-old kid back then, I took it as a fun horror story and let it be. When I recalled this incident yesterday, I decided to ask my mum about the details. So I asked her to explain how that actually is. She told me that I was sitting on the floor of our bathroom, and she said that it looked like an early man. Told me it was so gigantic, and when it stood up on its legs, he easily reached the ceiling. As she froze and started screaming for help to my dad, this creature took only a couple of very, very long strides, and then disappeared. She says she doesn't recall much details from how this thing actually disappeared. I asked her why she calls this thing a demon. She said that's because what her first guess was. I asked, so you mean to say it looked like a caveman? She said, no, it wasn't a man or human in the first place. A beast? I asked. She said yes. She said it had very long hair all over its body, and their hair had a soil-like colour. Immediately, my brain said, Bigfoot? Then I googled Bigfoot and showed her the images. She said that it was very much of the same appearance as those images. I was shocked to hear that. The thing is, I'm from India. Nobody ever heard of any Bigfoot in India, let alone in an urban environment. And that too, in one's bathroom. As weird and illogical this incident sounds, it really happened. My mum rarely believes in things like this and is always very serious towards life. She's never been attention-seeking or something, and this incident never helped her in any way. In fact, she was facing so many more challenges in life that this incident was a fresh wound on already wounded skin. So what do you guys think of this incident?
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.